Hello everyone and welcome back to another tutorial about the Lightning Network on the web. Today we will have a look at how we can authenticate your users with the use of the Lightning Network. What's good about this feature is that you don't need an email or password to register and sign in, which makes it a really smooth experience. We will continue on the blog we made in the previous video and add this login button on the top. And if you press on the button, you will take into this login page where you have a QR code. You can either scan this QR code with your phone if you have a Lightning wallet on there, or if you have a browser extension, you can just click on it and you will take into this authentication window. Just press login, and once that has been processed, you will take it back to the blog, and here you can see that you're logged in as the public key of the wallet you use to authenticate yourself with. So even though this is the first time I log into this page, I don't have to register or anything like that, which makes it a really smooth experience. So let's have a look at how we can implement this. Let's first get an overview of what the project will look like. We will have two main parts. We will have the client, which is just the React app that we created in the previous video. And then we will also have a server, which we will use Express.js for. And on the client side, we won't do a lot of coding in this tutorial. We'll pretty much just add a login button and some API calls. And then once we call on an endpoint on the server, which we'll have on localhost port 3001, that will trigger the logic about the authentication. And in here we'll use the npm package passport lnurl-auth. And that will just trigger that login page to appear and handle all of that logic for us. And then once the user have authenticated, we can make another call to the /user endpoint on the server, and then we'll get back the user ID if there is a user. Alright, so let's dive into the code. So here we are in VS Code. You can get this starting code from the description below if you like to code along. We have basically just a client folder in here, which is the React app we created in the previous tutorial. What we'll do now is just start to create the server. So we'll create a new folder that is called server. And we go into that folder in the terminal. And here we'll write npm init y to initiate a new server. We get this package.json file, and we also need to create a new file that we can call index.js. And in here I'll just copy paste some boilerplate Express code where we import the Express package, we say which port we want the server to be, and then we just initiate the Express server. And then we say just console log that we're listening to the port. And the final thing we need to do before we can try this out is to, of course, install Express. npm install Express, like that. And then also in the package.json file, we want to remove this test script and just replace it with a start script instead, so we can just write npm start. And here we just need to say node index.js. So just point at the index.js file we just created. So we save that, make sure we save this. Now we should be able to just run npm start. And we start the server and we see that we're listening to the port 3001. So next we'll have a look at the documentation for the passport lnurl-auth package. So this is the package we'll be using, which handles all the logic behind authentication. And if you want to learn more about it, just head in here and read. If you scroll down, you'll get a link to this simple server, which is just an example server to try out the package. And we'll use this code as a starting point for our server. So just copy all of this and head back into VS Code. And in our index.js file, we'll just replace the code we have with the one we copied. So let's have a quick look through of the code here. In the beginning, there's just the initialization of the Express app like we had before, a little bit different syntax. We'll change the port to 3001 instead of 3000 because 3000 is where we have our React app. And then here it's just some boilerplate code. Here we have the lnurl-auth strategy, which is one of the two main parts of this package. It basically handles a lot of the logic behind the authentication. It's nothing we need to change, so we just keep it as it is. Down here we have our first endpoint, which is the dash or slash. In here we'll check if the user is authenticated, and if it's not authenticated, we will display the text, "You're not authenticated, to log in, go to this link." And if we are authenticated, we just show a text that's saying logged in. And then at another endpoint, the /login endpoint, we'll also check if there's a user. And if there is a user, we just go here. But if there's not a user, we call the second part of this package, which is the middleware, which prompts this login window to open up and where we display the QR code and stuff. Okay, but to try this code out, we just need to change a few things. First, we need to change this package, lnurl-auth. This is we need to change this to const lnurl-auth equals require, and then the package, which is passport lnurl-auth, like that. We save it, we can stop listening, and we also need to install a package. To run npm install passport lnurl-auth. But as you see up here, we also have two other packages, passport and express sessions. We need to install those as well. So we can just write it down here, passport and express session. That will install all three of the packages. All right, so when that's done, we don't need to change anything else in here. We can just head into our client and add a login button, and we do that in the source and in the app.js file. And in here, we'll just create a login button in the navbar. We can do that below the create post button. We can actually just copy this and use the same syntax. Let's change to another icon. So we just import another one, say md login. In here, change the icon, md login. And then we'll change the text here to login. Now, of course, we also need to change the function here, where we handle onClick. And it will be very similar to the navigate create post. So we'll copy that. And instead, we'll call it navigate login, like that. But instead of navigating just to another site on another page on the React app, we need to replace the window. So we're gonna do like this. We're gonna do replace window.location.replace. And here we'll replace it to the endpoint in the server, which is HTTP or localhost, but then port 3001. And the endpoint we want to go to is login. Or actually, we can just go here first. And then we change this on click here to navigate login. So let's save that. And we need to run the server, so npm start in here. Now the server is running, but we also need to start up the React app. So then we go into the client folder and type npm start in here. So this will open up the React app. Let's go to localhost. Here we are. We don't have any post right now, but we see the login button up here. And if we press it, we'll be taken into localhost 3001. So now we're in the server. And we see the endpoint, just slash. And if we click here, we go to login. And this will prompt this window with the QR code. And if we press this, we will be taken into our browser extension, and we can log in to this lnurl-auth. And just like that, we get passed through to logged in. What we want to do next is that when the user have logged in, we want the user to be taken back into the blog again. So in our index.js file, under the login endpoint, we'll change what happens once the user has been authenticated. So instead of going to just /, we'll go into our localhost 3000. So we type http localhost port 3000 and just / to go home in the blog. And also if we press cancel during the login phase, we also want to go back to the blog. So we can just copy paste that and change this config here to that. Okay, we save that, and to have the changes go into effect in the server, you need to first cancel it, save the file and run it again. We also want to change in our client side, in our app.js. Instead of going to this endpoint, we want to go straight to the login endpoint, so the user don't have to click login again. Okay, so we can save that as well. Head back into the browser. If we press login now, we'll head straight into this login site. And if we press here and authenticate, once that loads, we should be taken back into the blog. Yeah, and here we are. Okay, what we want to do next is add another endpoint so we can get some information about our user in the client. So we can go into our index.js file in the server, and below our login endpoint, we'll create another get endpoint. So we say app.get, and the name of the endpoint, we can call it user. And this will be a very simple function where we just have our request, our result, and the only thing we'll do with this is to send the request.user, which is where we save the information about the user. So when we call this endpoint now in our client, we should get this back. So that's everything we need on the server side. So we can save this, and then we can just restart the server so it's up to date. And then we can head back into our client. So what we'll do here is just implement so that every time we render our app, we'll make the user request. So we see if there's a user logged in or not. And a good way to do that is to make use of the use effect hook. So let's just add that. Say use effect. And in here, we will make an Axios call. So say Axios, let's see, importing it a little bit wrong. Without import of Axios, you get these curly braces, but you don't want that with Axios, you want it like that. Okay, so back to Axios, parentheses, curly braces, and here we define a method, and it's a get endpoint. And we also want it to be with credentials. And this is very important because if you set credentials to false, the information about the user will not get sent. So very important to set this to true. And then we specify the URL, which is the HTTP localhost port 3001 /user, which is the endpoint we just created in the server. And then once we made a call, we would like to just get the response, and we'll just console log it for now, just to see what we get back. Okay, so let's save this, head back into our browser, reload. Let's get the console up, and here we have a bunch of errors. Let's see here. Oh yeah, some of the errors is because of our posts. So we can just easily solve that by creating a new terminal and go into our client and say npm run server. This is just a basic JSON server we have where we save the posts. So once we have that up and running, we should get rid of those errors. And we also get some posts, which is pretty nice. We'll still have some other errors in here. Let's see. Oh yeah, course. Course is just a policy in most modern web browsers that will not allow anyone to have control to the origin. So what you need to do now is head back into the server. And in here, we can just install a new package called course. npm install course. And we'll import it in the top. Say require course. And then we just need to specify which URL we are communicating with. So underneath where we initiate the Express server, we can say app.use course and the origin, which is our React app, localhost 3000. And in here we also want to specify that we're sending credentials. So set credentials to true. All right, that should get rid of the course problem. So let's start server again, head back into the browser, we can reload. So we see that the course error is gone, but we still have this 404 not found error. And I think we just made an error in on our server side. So let's head back into index.js and our user, yeah, I made an error. You need a slash here, of course. So just add that, save, restart the server. And we head back into the browser, refresh, and here we go. No more errors, and we see that we get this response. So there's not any data here, but this was still an OK request. So if we try to log in, we should now get some user data in here. So we see right here in the data, we got the user ID, which is the public key of the wallet I used to sign in with. All right, great. So next up is to create the last endpoint for this tutorial, which is the logout endpoint. So we head up into our index.js file, and this endpoint will be very similar to the login endpoint. So we can just copy that, at least the upper part of it, and then below our user, we can just paste it in. Let's change the name to logout. And then in this if statement where we check if the user is logged in, we would like to log out the user. And we can do that by just destroying the current session by calling session.destroy. Because it's in the session we save the information about the user, and if we destroy it, then we remove the user basically. And then after that's been done, maybe we would like to just send back a message where we say that the user has been logged out. So we just say message user logged out or something like that. And then just redirect to our blog's homepage. And then if we don't have a user and we call this endpoint, then we don't really want to do anything, so we just call this next. And right here we should just add a parentheses, some semicolons, and this should be it. So let's save this and just oh, we got some errors here. Never mind those, just restart the server. And then we'll add some more things in our client. So we head back into app.js, and we would like to call the logout endpoint by pressing on a button. So let's create that button first. We can go into our navbar and just copy paste our login button, paste it in below, and then we can change the name to logout. And we'd like to have a new icon, so let's import that. MD logout should be one, yeah. And then we change it down here as well, logout. And then we need a new function to call when we press this button. So let's create that. So below the navigate login, we can create a new function that we can call navigate logout. And this will also be an empty function like this. And in here, the only thing we want to do is just make an Axios call to the endpoint we just created. So we can go up here where we have the Axios call for our user. We can copy that and just paste it in here. We don't really need to change much. We still use the get method and we want the credentials. We just want another endpoint, the logout endpoint. And then we can just console log the response here as well. And this is, we would expect to see the message that we created. All right, so let's connect this to our button, navigate logout. And if we save this and head back into the browser, we should be able to log out. But first we need to log in. So go through these steps. We logged in and now we log out. Okay, we need to bring up the console to see what happens here. Let's see. Okay, we got some error. Internal server error. What could this be? Let's head back into the console. rec.json. Oh yeah, I made a mistake here again. We needed to have rest.json. We save that, boot up the server again, and see if this works better. And refresh the page. We can log in, go through the steps. And now we log out. Good, no errors. We get the message back, the user logged out. So it works just like we expected to. So now we have all the functionality at place. The final thing I want to do is just do some styling. And the first thing we can do is just make a conditional statement. So we only show one of these buttons at the same time. So if we logged in, we want to see the logout button and vice versa. So let's start off with that. We head back into the client, and in our app.js file, we can begin with creating a state for the user. So up in the top, we say const user and set user. This will be equal to useState, import that, and the initial state can be null. And here where we fetch our user from our server, we can just check if we have a user or not. By just saying if result.data.id exists, then we want to set the user with this ID. And then if we don't have this ID, that means we're not logged in, so we want to set the user to null. And also down here in our navigate logout function, we would like to set the user to null if the user log out. So set user to null. All right, and then down here, where we have our buttons, we would like to do another conditional statement where we just display one of the buttons depending on the state of the user. So in curly braces here, we say if the user is equal to null, then we would like to show this first button. Because if it's null, then we are not logged in and we want to show the login button. But if we have a user, we'd like to show the logout button, which we have down here. And we need to close that with curly braces, like this. And also, if we logged in, we can show just some text where we say or logged in as user, which will display the user ID, which is the public key of the wallet you use to authenticate yourself with. Okay, so let's save this. And no errors, look good. Head back into the browser. And now we're logged out and we only see login button. We click on it, we go through these steps. And now we see the logout button, and we also see this long string, which is the public key of the wallet. So let's just add some styling here so we don't see this entire string, because it just takes up too much space. Head back here, and in app.css, I'm just gonna paste in some CSS that I made earlier. Actually, I already had it here. All right. Save that anyway, and just connect this to this paragraph that we made. Class name, user. Save that, head back into here, and that looks a little bit better. So we just cut off the string, so we don't show it all. All right, the final thing I want to do is to do something with this login screen. And this login screen is prompted from the server side. So if we go into the documentation of the Passport package, and down here in the middleware, we see that we have a couple of different settings. One of them are this login template file path, where we can specify our own login page. So let's make use of that. So head back into VS Code, and we go down to the server, and in here we can create a new file. We can call it login.html, and I'm just gonna copy paste in some code that I have here. I basically just took the template file and changed it a little bit, but you can do whatever you want with this. I save that, I head back into index.js, find this middleware, and then we'll add this login template file path. Just copy that, head back. This path here is a package that we need to install. So let's head into the right terminal and close the server and type npm install path. And then we need to import it as well in the top. Const path equals require path, like that. And then we can just remove this in the middle here. Don't really need it. All right. So here you just specify the path. If you put it in a folder, you have to specify it here. Okay, but we save that, and we run the server again. Head back into our localhost, and here we see it, our Lightning blog. But let's head back into our localhost 3000 first and do it in the right order. So we press the login page, we get into this new styled login page, and now we also see a new title here, because it displays the title of the login page that you have, or you can also specify it in the middleware section. Press login, it works just as before. All right. So now we have created this authentication by using the Lightning Network. It became quite a long video. Thank you for watching the whole thing. I hope you learned something. And of course, this is only to be seen as a starting point for how to implement this. This is not production ready, but I hope this will give you a good head start. All right, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.